Ethan Cole had always seen the world through a lens. Where others saw decay, he saw beauty. Where others turned away, he leaned in with his camera, capturing moments that no one else noticed. His small apartment in Chicago was cluttered with prints of forgotten alleyways, rusting machinery, and broken-down houses, all proof of his deep obsession with the abandoned and the overlooked. He wasn't famous. Not yet. Most of his work went unnoticed on social media, buried beneath travel bloggers and wedding photographers. But Ethan believed that true art came from forgotten places. And he was determined to find something extraordinary. One rainy afternoon, while walking home from a disappointing client shoot, Ethan ducked into a narrow alleyway he hadn't noticed before. At the far end stood a small, dusty pawn shop with flickering lights and a crooked sign, "Curios and Keepsakes." Something about the name drew him in. Inside, the shop was dimly lit and packed to the ceiling with clutter, old clocks, cracked mirrors, musical instruments, faded books. Ethan wandered through the narrow aisles until something caught his eye, a vintage camera sitting on a velvet cloth, almost glowing in the low light. It was a 1920s model, boxy and heavy with strange symbols etched into the metal body, spirals, triangles, and an eye motif he didn't recognize. "Beautiful, isn't it?" came a raspy voice behind him. Ethan turned to see the shopkeeper, an old man with pale skin and watery eyes. He wore a moth-eaten sweater and moved like someone much older than he looked. "How much?" Ethan asked. The shopkeeper paused. "It's not for everyone. This camera sees things. Things most eyes can't. It belonged to a photographer who went mad trying to capture the truth. Some say it's cursed." Ethan chuckled, assuming it was a sales tactic. "Perfect. I love creepy stories. How much?" The old man sighed and leaned closer. "I'll give it to you for $50, but don't say I didn't warn you. And don't use it after midnight." That last part made Ethan laugh. "Got it. No midnight shots. Thanks, man." As he walked out with the camera in hand, the bell above the door jingled softly behind him. The sky had cleared, and a shaft of golden sunlight hit the lens of the old camera just right, casting a prism of color over Ethan's face. He didn't notice the way the light bent unnaturally or how the shadows around him seemed to deepen. Back at his apartment, Ethan cleared off a table and set up the camera. It didn't use digital storage, so he had to find some 35mm film. He popped a roll in and wound it carefully, excited to try it out the next day. But even as he got ready for bed, he couldn't stop thinking about what the shopkeeper had said. "It sees things." What things? He pulled out his phone and tried to look up the symbols etched into the metal casing, but nothing came up, at least nothing concrete. Some forums linked the spiral and eye symbol to old occult groups, spirit photography, and ghost hunters from the early 20th century. A few posts claimed certain vintage cameras could capture spiritual energy or record what the human eye couldn't perceive. Ethan's heart raced a little. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he loved the mystery. Maybe he'd stumbled upon something rare, a story behind the lens, a series, a documentary, something that could finally put his name on the map. Before bed, he couldn't resist snapping one photo of his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The shutter clicked with a metallic snap that echoed louder than it should have. He placed the camera on his nightstand and lay in bed, smiling. Tomorrow, he'd develop the film and see what secrets this old relic might reveal. But as he drifted off, he failed to notice the faint sound of the camera winding itself, slowly and deliberately, as if it were preparing for something. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds of Ethan's cramped studio apartment. He sat at his small dining table with a cup of stale coffee, staring at the vintage camera like it was a buried treasure. There was a sense of excitement buzzing under his skin, the same kind he used to feel as a kid opening a mystery box. He grabbed his gear and made his way to the darkroom he rented twice a week in a community art center downtown. It was quiet there and familiar, the smell of developer chemicals, the hum of old pipes, and the dull red glow of the safety light always made him feel like he belonged. Ethan loaded the film into the tank, carefully following every step. As the first few shots developed, he saw exactly what he expected. A few test images of his cluttered apartment, the view from his window, and one dimly lit shot of his reflection in the bathroom mirror. But when he pinned the print of that mirror photo to dry, something about it stopped him cold. His own face stared back at him from the photo, but it wasn't alone. Behind him, barely visible in the shadows, was the figure of a woman. She was standing just behind his right shoulder, her head tilted slightly, long black hair covering part of her face. Her dress looked dated, maybe early 20th century, and her eyes, well, there were no eyes. Just pale, sunken sockets where they should have been. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He looked around, half expecting someone to be watching him playing a prank. But the room was empty. Just the humming pipes and the creak of the old floorboards under his feet. He yanked the print down and stared at it under the brighter light by the sink. No way. It had to be a glitch. Maybe a reflection from the shower curtain or something on the wall behind him. But the details were too clear, too human. His heart pounded. He looked at the negative. The woman was there too, faint but unmistakable. This wasn't a Photoshop trick or a random smear. She was in the frame. But Ethan knew, that there had been no one else in that room when he took the picture. He had locked the bathroom door. He had been alone. He hurried back home with the prints, his mind spinning. He laid them out on his bed and stared at the photo again, this time trying to convince himself it was just pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see faces in random patterns. But the more he looked, the more it felt like she was staring back at him. Her presence in the photo wasn't passive. Felt deliberate, intentional. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The photo sat on his desk, flipped over, but he could feel its weight in the room. Around 2 a.m., he got up and walked to the bathroom, turning on the light and studying the mirror where the photo had been taken. Nothing. He stood in the same spot, held up his phone camera, and snapped another selfie. Nothing unusual. Still, something felt off. The air was heavier, the silence deeper. He tried to distract himself by reading more about spirit photography. He found stories about early photographers who believed cameras could reveal hidden truths, images of the dead lingering among the living. Some even believed certain lenses could pierce the veil between worlds. Most people dismissed them as hoaxes, but a few forums took it very seriously. One post stood out. It mentioned cameras that had been touched by death, cameras used in tragic events or owned by people who had gone mad. The post warned that using such cameras was like opening a door without knowing what's on the other side. Ethan closed his laptop. He walked back to the desk, turned the photo face up again, and stared at the ghostly woman's face, or what remained of it. There was something hypnotic about her. Like she wanted to be seen. He whispered aloud, "Who are you?" A gust of wind rattled his window. And for just a moment, in the corner of the glass reflection, he thought he saw the outline of a figure standing silently, watching him. But when he turned around, the room was empty. The days that followed were anything but normal. Ethan tried to dismiss what he saw in the photograph as a trick of the light, a camera glitch, or even a bizarre coincidence. But the feeling that he wasn't alone never left him. It started with small things. Items in his apartment moved slightly from where he remembered placing them. His keys, which he always left on the kitchen counter, would end up on the bathroom sink. His framed photographs tilted themselves on the wall, one by one, as if something invisible passed through the room. He told himself he was overthinking it until the night he woke up to the sound of the camera shutter clicking. Ethan bolted upright in bed. The room was dark, lit only by the soft glow from the streetlight outside his window. The old camera sat on the desk, aimed loosely in his direction. Its mechanical shutter clicked once more, even though no one had touched it. He stared at it, heart pounding. Maybe it was a mechanical error. Maybe the wind nudged it somehow. But the room was sealed shut, and the camera had no automatic feature. In the morning, curiosity and dread pushed him to develop the new photos. He hadn't taken any, at least not consciously. But someone or something had. The first photo showed his bedroom, just as it was. In the second photo, a shadow appeared in the corner. By the fifth, the same pale woman was visible, closer now, her blurry face turned toward the camera, her body bent slightly, like she was crawling toward the lens. Ethan nearly dropped the prints. Each shot brought her closer. In the final one, she stood directly in front of the camera, her face nearly pressed to the lens. Her mouth was open, not screaming, smiling. From that moment, everything spiraled. He started hearing whispers in the apartment. Faint voices in the dead of night, saying words he couldn't quite make out. Sometimes they echoed his name. Other times it was weeping, sad, hopeless crying from a voice that didn't belong to anyone he knew. Lights flickered. The temperature dropped. His cat, Nico, hissed at empty corners and eventually refused to come near the desk where the camera sat. Ethan tried taking normal pictures with his phone and modern DSLR. But nothing strange showed up in those. No ghosts, no shadows, no crawling women. Only the vintage camera captured the other side. It was driving him mad. He started documenting everything, journaling, recording audio, setting up a secondary camera in the room while he slept. He even tried speaking to the spirit aloud, asking what she wanted, what she was doing. No answers came, only more disturbances. His friends noticed the change in him. He became reclusive, barely responding to texts. His best friend Marcus came over one afternoon to check on him. "Dude," Marcus said, looking around the darkened apartment. "It smells like mold and you look like hell." Ethan waved him off. "You wouldn't understand." Marcus walked over to the desk, eyeing the camera. "This thing? Is this what's got you so messed up?" "Come on, man. It's just an old camera." Before Ethan could stop him, Marcus picked it up and pointed it at Ethan. "Smile." Click. Ethan lunged forward and snatched the camera back. "Don't touch it. Don't ever touch it again." Marcus backed away, startled. All right. Chill." That night, Marcus called him, voice shaky. I developed the photo. Ethan, I saw her. That thing you've been talking about. She's real." The line went dead. The next day, Marcus was missing. No one had seen him. His phone was disconnected. Ethan went to his apartment, empty. All that remained was a single printed photo left on Marcus's kitchen table. In it, Marcus sat on his couch looking confused. Behind him, just barely visible, was the woman. Her hand was on his shoulder. Ethan realized then she wasn't just appearing in photos. She was moving. And now she could follow. After Marcus disappeared, Ethan barely left his apartment. Days and nights blurred together, consumed by fear, confusion, and a desperate need for answers. The once confident photographer now avoided mirrors and shadows, jumping at every creak in the floorboards or flicker of light. But he couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The camera was no ordinary relic. It was a doorway to something far beyond human understanding. He needed to know where it came from. With trembling hands, Ethan returned to the pawn shop where he had first found the camera, curios, and keepsakes. But when he reached the narrow alleyway, his heart dropped. The shop was gone. In its place was a boarded-up storefront covered in graffiti. A homeless man nearby saw Ethan staring and said, "You looking for that old curiosity place?" "Been gone for years, man. Burned down in '98. Ethan's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I was just here a few weeks ago." The man shrugged. "Maybe you were, maybe you weren't." Stunned and disturbed, Ethan turned to research. He dug through old library records, online archives, and local forums about vintage photography. It took hours, but he finally found a reference to a nearly identical camera, same engravings, same model, same symbols, in an article from 1928. It belonged to a man named James Hallberg, an experimental photographer known for his obsession with capturing the spirit realm. Hallberg was widely regarded as a lunatic in his time. According to the article, he claimed to have created a spiritual aperture, a modified camera lens that could record beings invisible to the human eye. Hallberg became infamous for a series of photographs showing blurry, inhuman shapes often standing beside living subjects. Critics dismissed them as double exposures or manipulations, but his final works were different. Distinct, detailed, disturbingly real. Then, in the winter of 1930, James Hallberg vanished. His apartment was found empty, his darkroom destroyed. Police reports mentioned a room full of photographs plastered wall to wall, all of the same woman with black hair and hollow eyes. The only physical object missing? His custom-built camera. Ethan leaned back from the screen, his pulse hammering. His camera, had a long, dark history of obsession, madness, and disappearance. He turned to the photos he'd taken over the last week. In every single one, the woman was closer. More detailed. It was no longer just a shadow, she had depth now. Texture. Intent. Her face, though distorted, looked vaguely familiar. And her eyes, or the empty spaces where they should be, seemed to be watching him. He grabbed a magnifying glass and inspected the carvings on the camera again. The same spiral and eye symbols, but something else stood out now, a small word etched faintly along the side in Latin, speculum animarum. A quick translation online revealed the meaning, mirror of souls. His stomach turned. He opened Hallberg's police file again and saw a quote scribbled in one corner from the investigator: "The camera is not a tool for capturing memories. It is a cage, and sometimes the cage breaks." Ethan backed away from the desk. Everything made sense now, the photos, the whispers, Marcus's disappearance. The camera didn't just see what others couldn't. It opened something. That night, Ethan tried to destroy it. He placed it in a plastic bag and slammed it with a hammer. But the metal didn't even dent. He tried setting it on fire, but the flames refused to catch. He even drove out to a secluded lake and threw it into the water. It sank quickly. He returned home thinking he was free, that maybe finally it was over. But when he woke up the next morning, the camera was on his nightstand, right where it always had been. He stared at it, mouth dry, heart beating in his throat. Attached to it now was a freshly developed photo. It showed Ethan, asleep in bed, and the woman, no longer distant, was standing directly over him, face inches from his, mouth open wide, almost as if she was about to speak. Ethan stared at the photograph for what felt like hours. The woman's mouth was frozen mid-breath, like the camera had caught her just as she was about to whisper a secret. Her face, though still partially obscured by stringy black hair, now had clearer features, sunken cheeks, bruised skin, and the faintest suggestion of sorrow behind the darkness. The eyes were still hollow, but there was something new in her expression. Not rage, not hunger, grief. That realization rattled Ethan. If she wasn't trying to harm him, what was she trying to do? He couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to communicate, to show him something, to be seen. After all, the camera didn't just capture her. It drew her closer with every click. He decided he needed to confront her. Not run, not hide, but make contact. He set up a controlled photo session in his apartment, this time preparing everything like a real shoot. One single chair in the middle of the room. Dim lighting. The vintage camera on a tripod. A fresh roll of film. Ethan sat in silence for a moment, staring through the viewfinder. Then he pressed the shutter. Click. Nothing happened. No shadows moved. No whispers. He took another. And another. The room remained quiet. But when he developed the film that night, the results were different. In every photo, the woman was there. But she wasn't just creeping in the background anymore. She was sitting in the chair, still, looking directly at the camera, as if waiting. In the final shot, her lips were parted again, mid-sentence. Her face was no longer contorted in rage or blurred by motion. She looked almost human. Ethan stared at the image for a long time. Then, in a moment of impulse, he did something irrational. He spoke aloud to the photo. "I see you," he said softly. "What do you want?" The room remained still. He leaned closer to the photo, scanning her face, trying to find answers. And then he noticed something chilling. In the bottom left corner of the photo, barely visible, was a reflection in a broken mirror hanging behind her. The reflection didn't show her, it showed another room. A small, windowless space. Like a cellar. There was a name scratched faintly into the mirror's glass, Clara. He felt a jolt in his chest. He had a name now. Clara. Fueled by obsession and a desperate need for the truth, Ethan began researching missing persons tied to old photography or haunted legends. After hours digging through old databases and records, he found a case from 1929, a woman named Clara Hallberg, the sister of James Hallberg, the same man who created the camera. Clara had been institutionalized after claiming her brother was using her as a vessel to communicate with the dead. She claimed James had opened something and that she was being followed by shadows that live in the lens. Her last journal entry before she vanished from the hospital read, "He promised he would trap them. He said the camera would hold them. But they don't want to be trapped, they want to be seen. And now so do I." The record said Clara had disappeared from her hospital room. No one ever found her body. The official cause, suicide. But there were rumors, whispers, that she had been captured in one of James's final photographs. Ethan sat back, horrified. Clara wasn't just a ghost. She had become part of the camera. A soul trapped in the mirror of souls, endlessly repeating her final moments, reaching out to whoever dared to see her. He stared at the photo again and whispered, "Clara, are you still in there?" And for the first time, something happened. The photo in his hand shifted. The image flickered like an old film reel, and Clara's face slowly turned, not just in the print, but in real time. Ethan dropped the photo in shock. Across the room, the vintage camera clicked by itself. And then, a faint voice. "I see you too." The lights in his apartment dimmed. The air turned cold. The sound of the shutter echoed again. Ethan realized it wasn't just about seeing Clara. Clara had seen him. And now she wasn't alone in the photograph anymore. After Clara spoke, everything changed. Ethan wasn't just haunted anymore, he was bound. Whatever invisible tether connected him to the camera had tightened. It wasn't a haunting in the traditional sense with flickering lights and cold drafts. No, this was personal now. Clara wasn't just appearing in photographs. She was entering his world, manipulating it, and speaking directly to him. The next few days felt like a waking nightmare. Wherever Ethan went, the camera followed. He'd leave it locked in a closet, only to find it waiting on the kitchen table when he returned. He once tried leaving it at a nearby church, not to exorcise it, just to get it out of his home. But that night, it reappeared on his pillow. With it came another photo. This time, Ethan wasn't in the frame, but his apartment was, and Clara was sitting in his chair, staring at the spot where he would have been standing. The message was clear. She was waiting for him. He began experiencing violent dreams. In one, he stood in a room filled with mirrors, but his reflection was always replaced by Clara's hollow-eyed stare. In another, he found himself behind the lens, being forced to take photos of people he loved. And in each image, Clara loomed just behind them, reaching out. Ethan became afraid to sleep. He boarded up the windows, removed every reflective surface from the apartment. Still, Clara found ways to appear, in a puddle of spilled water, in the static on his TV screen, even in the grain of the wooden floor. Then came the worst development. Clara started showing up in photographs Ethan didn't take. His phone would light up with images he'd never captured. Photos of himself brushing his teeth, eating dinner, pacing the apartment. In all of them, Clara crept closer. Sometimes her face was just inches from his. Sometimes she was looking at the lens. And sometimes, she was smiling. The scariest part wasn't just seeing her. It was realizing that Clara didn't seem angry. She seemed glad. Glad that Ethan could finally see her. Glad someone was still using the camera. Glad to be remembered, even if only as a ghost. But Ethan wasn't glad. He was breaking. He stopped going to work. Ignored his family's messages. The apartment became a cave of fear and isolation. Even Nico, his cat, had disappeared. One night he found tufts of Nico's fur on the carpet and a blurry photo of the hallway, with Clara holding something small in her arms. Ethan was unraveling. He tried one final experiment, recording himself for an entire night on video while the vintage camera sat beside his bed. He wanted to know if Clara only showed herself in film, or if she could now interact with the real world, unfiltered. When he watched the footage the next morning, his breath caught in his throat. Around 3:33 a.m., the camera beside his bed shifted on its own. Then the shutter clicked. Ethan didn't move, but a shadow did rise from the camera's direction. And then, in full view of the lens, Clara climbed out of the camera. It wasn't quick or clean. It was disturbing, like watching someone tear through an invisible membrane. Her hands reached out first, then her head, her spine bending unnaturally. When she finally stood, she walked toward Ethan's sleeping body. She bent down and whispered into his ear. The recording didn't capture sound at that moment, just static. But Ethan heard her words even before replaying it. "Help me." He paused the video, heart pounding. This wasn't about terror or vengeance. Clara wanted out. But every attempt he made to destroy or discard the camera had failed. So how could he help a ghost trapped in a century-old artifact? And worse, what if setting her free released something worse? That night, Ethan developed one final photo, just one. It showed Clara crying with hands pressed against an unseen wall. Behind her, in the background, were other shadowy figures, dozens of them, twisted, screaming, reaching. Ethan realized Clara wasn't alone. She had been trying to protect him from them. The image haunted Ethan, Clara crying inside that spectral prison with dozens of other shadowy figures behind her. He couldn't stop staring at it. There was something deeply tragic in her expression. Fear, yes, but also resignation. As if she had accepted her fate even though she still hoped someone might free her. And now Ethan knew Clara had never been the threat. She was the warning. He combed through every note, every photo, every detail from Hallberg's files. James Hallberg didn't just create the camera to capture ghosts, he'd built it to contain them. Clara must have been the first soul it trapped, but she wasn't the last. Over the decades, the camera had passed from person to person. Each time it was used, it took more souls, pieces of reality, glimpses of the unseen. The people who vanished weren't being hunted. They were being added to the collection. That's what happened to Marcus. He hadn't simply disappeared. He'd been absorbed, imprisoned in the same realm behind the lens. The more Ethan studied the last photo of Clara, the more he noticed. One of the blurry figures behind her looked familiar. Marcus. Ethan couldn't breathe. He staggered back from the photo, trembling. The camera wasn't haunted. It was cursed. A spiritual vacuum. An artifact designed to trap souls in moments of intense emotion, fear, despair, trauma. And now it was reaching the end of its cycle. It didn't want to just observe anymore. It wanted to consume. But there was one more discovery. Buried deep in the Hallberg archives in an old handwritten letter Ethan found quoted in a photography journal was a passage from James Hallberg himself. The mirror must be sealed. If broken, the souls will be freed, yes, but so too will the original subject. She is no longer my sister. Clara is the key and the lock. Ethan finally understood. Clara hadn't been trapped by accident. She was the first. She had helped power the camera. Her presence, her image, was what bound the other souls inside. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was a guardian, keeping the others at bay. But if she was released, if the connection was broken, every soul the camera had collected over the last century would be unleashed into the world. And something worse would come with them. Ethan was faced with an impossible choice. Option 1, do nothing. Keep the camera. Hide it, maybe even lock it away. But the haunting would continue. Eventually, it would find someone else. And the cycle would start again. Option 2, try to destroy the camera. But that would only send Clara back to eternal limbo. And possibly scatter the trapped souls without structure, turning them into pure chaos. Option 3, finish what Hallberg never could. Seal the camera permanently, trap it in a place it could never escape from. But Ethan didn't know how, and Clara's voice had grown weaker. The last photo he took showed her fading, her form dissolving, her hands no longer pressed to the invisible wall. She was slipping away. Desperate, Ethan spoke to the camera again, holding it tightly. I know what you are. I know what you've done. But I want to save her. Tell me how? And for the first time, he heard them all. Not just Clara. Dozens of voices, whispering, crying, screaming, chanting. The lights in the apartment blew out. The walls pulsed with shadow. The camera's shutter snapped open by itself and stayed open, the lens glowing with a deep red light. And then a voice louder than the others, Clara's, let them see. Show the truth. One last picture and end it. Ethan understood. The only way to close the portal forever was to take one final photo. Of himself. A sacrifice. If he entered the photograph willingly and became the final image, he could seal the camera, shut the aperture, and trap the others permanently. Including himself. He loaded the last roll of film into the camera. He sat down where Clara once appeared. He aimed the lens. And whispered, I'm ready. Click. The flash went off. And then silence. Click. The shutter closed. But the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was complete. Not the quiet of a sleeping room, but a void. As if the world had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe again. Ethan sat frozen in the chair, unsure whether he was alive, dreaming, or already a memory inside the camera. The air around him felt still, thick, and heavy, like time had slowed to a crawl. Then the temperature shifted. Warmer, softer. He stood slowly, disoriented, expecting to see Clara or the distorted, shrieking souls from the last photo. But there was no one. Just light, golden, natural light, stretching across a field of grass that hadn't existed seconds ago. Ethan was no longer in his apartment. He wasn't even sure he was in his body anymore. Around him, the sky shimmered with static like the flicker of old film. Trees faded in and out at the edges of his vision, and he could hear faint whispers like a radio dial caught between stations. And then he saw her. Clara. She looked different now. Not broken. Not pale and spectral. She looked free. Her hair blew in a breeze Ethan couldn't feel. Her eyes were clear. No longer hollow, no longer burdened. They stared at each other for a long time. Then she smiled. Thank you, she said, and her voice didn't echo like before. It sounded real. Grounded. Ethan tried to speak, but no words came. He felt a warmth in his chest, a strange peace he couldn't explain. Then Clara turned. Behind her, the light fractured, and dozens of blurry figures emerged, the other souls. Some still twisted in form, others slowly regaining clarity. One by one, they passed by Ethan. Some nodded. Some wept. One of them, Marcus, placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder and said, "You did what none of us could." They vanished into the light. And Clara, the last to leave, turned once more. "You gave us what we needed to be seen." Then she too faded into the light. And Ethan was alone again. But this time he felt no fear. No pain. Just stillness. And as he looked down, he saw it, a final photograph developing beneath his feet, the image rippling like water. It was a photo of the room, his apartment, now empty. The camera sat on the table, its lens cracked, its light gone. It had taken its last soul. And it had closed. Back in the real world, the apartment was quiet. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows. The shadows were gone. The vintage camera sat on the table. Motionless. A police report filed days later stated that Ethan Cole had vanished without a trace. His apartment was untouched. No signs of foul play. No fingerprints except his. His phone was left behind with dozens of eerie photos, including a final one, Ethan seated in a chair, facing the camera. Smiling. No one knew where the photograph came from. Eventually, the camera was packed away by a landlord, stored in the back of a dusty pawnshop, forgotten. Waiting. But the strange thing? The store owner swore that sometimes when the shop was quiet at night, he'd hear a click from the back room. And once he found a photo sitting on the counter. A new one. Of himself, sleeping. 31.